Alright, so this is actually take two of a different video because I kind of crashed out in the first take. You guys should see sometimes what doesn't actually make it to the channel, as fucking stupid as I am normally. So I actually got an update from Elementary OS, and I don't like it. I don't really like what they said, because okay, so Elementary OS as a concept is trying to demystify the computer. I say this as I'm staring at a "your system is out of date" message, and I probably need to reboot it at some point, as well as to fix a major security vulnerability. It says, anyways. I made a video about Pantheon, and I actually posted the same thing to Mastodon, but I tagged Elementary OS in it so that they could respond if they had something to respond to. So they said they actually did make an on-screen keyboard for Pantheon, and they showed me a working demo of it. And so, like, one, just because you have a keyboard doesn't mean it's accessible. We're finding that out with Cosmic, KDE, Valve, GNOME, well, pretty much anybody on board, like anybody that has an on-screen keyboard. You can have an on-screen keyboard that isn't accessible. That isn't what makes it accessible. That's why I'm using KDE right now, because they're probably the closest. But the Pantheon keyboard is similar to the GNOME stock keyboard, not GJSOSK. It's similar to the on-screen keyboard you get when you don't have access to extensions, which would mean like you're on the lock screen, but basically there's no terminal on the lock screen unless you like switch to a TTY, in which case you don't have an on-screen keyboard anyways. So it's fine to have letters and numbers on a lock screen, but when you're in a Linux desktop environment, you need things like modifier keys, just like for sanity, because the idea behind a 2-in-1 is I should be able to remove or otherwise disable the keyboard. And the problem is, if you can't manipulate, like, anything but a text field, really, that is a major problem, because, like, you have to be able to operate your computer without an on-screen keyboard, or, sorry, without a physical keyboard. And what I'm getting at is, for people that can't use a physical keyboard, having an on-screen keyboard with modifier keys is very important. But basically, I told that to them. I said, are you going to add modifier keys? Because that's the same thing I told KDE when they started their on-screen keyboard. I said, are you going to add modifier keys? And they said, well, what do you need modifier keys for? And I said, well, I should be able to manipulate or, like, use a Linux terminal from my keyboard, like my on-screen keyboard. And they said, well, hopefully you can do things without the terminal. And that reminded me of the GNOME philosophy, because the GNOME philosophy is basically like the Apple philosophy. It's you do things our way or you don't do them at all, But in this case, the justification, I think, and don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's because they want you in the GUI, because the word is elementary and terminals are big and scary and you shouldn't use them, but that's just not really the way that, one, Linux operates, and two, and two, it's not the way that everybody uses a computer. So, like, while you can GUIfy pretty much anything, it's not ideal, and it's oftentimes not as accessible, even though you would think that touch accessibility wouldn't coincide with keyboard, like with the terminal, like typing shouldn't be considered accessible, but typing is oftentimes better than having a GUI for everything. And that's why I told them, I said, before we were using Linux for accessibility, we were using an Android tablet with Termux, and Termux is a Linux terminal inside of an Android phone, which has been mostly supplanted by by like the Debian terminal that Android ships now, but it's not quite as usable as a full GNU Linux desktop environment, even without GNU, honestly. I don't even know why I said that. But when you have, when you can't operate a full terminal with with an on-screen keyboard, it means you'll have to supplant everything with, or like replace everything that you're using command line with GUI apps. Now, luckily, we don't do much in the terminal now, so it is possible. I think like the main killer right now is YouTube DLP, and I'm sure we could do something like MPV. We're using like macros to run command line with MPV, and there's like some file manager shenanigans. We use a lot of command line. We're kind of advanced users. It's just the way it goes, you know. So that means that elementary OS isn't really something I want to look at, because if you're actively hurting people that use a full blown, you know, like an advanced Linux desktop system, that means you have abandoned some users, you know, and I'm probably going to be one of those users. So, like, for me, I have a physical keyboard, so it doesn't really matter so much to me, and they have told me that they have people with Starlight tablets that are trying to improve the user experience, but if the OSK is going to be a major hurdle, and if I'm going to have to argue about that, I might as well stick with KDE, because they already have this all working. Like, they're pretty much all the way there. They are by far the most accessible Linux desktop for people with low mobility, even way better than GNOME. I don't care what anybody says, because the same people, honestly, like when I tell them my use case, they say you don't need that, and I say, well, look, my use case isn't a normal use case. It's, you know, a very severe, like, paralysis kind of use case. So it's not something. It's not my choice, you know. It's not like I chose this use case. It's just fucking necessary, you know. Like, you need to have options, and GNOME is like all about not having options. Everything is offloaded to extensions, and when you do that, it means you have to run an older version of GNOME, which means that current GNOME is not accessible. Okay. So if current GNOME is not accessible, that means GNOME itself is not accessible. And that's kind of my whole argument, you know. I shouldn't have to roll a few versions behind current GNOME in order to get accessibility features. That's not something I should have to do. So you have to either integrate it into the system, or you have to stop breaking shit every time you update it, you know. Elementary OS, sadly, seems like they have the same philosophy. It's just, you know, do things the elementary OS way, or don't do them at all. And I don't agree with that philosophy. I think it's a horrible way to, you know, to create software. I much prefer KDE's approach, where if you can give them a valid use case, they'll add whatever you want, you know? And that's important, because there's a lot of fucking different use cases out there, and people need things. People need things to work on their computer. People need options. People need features. And, like, why is that so hard to why is that so hard to understand? Like, so anyways, that kind of soured my taste of elementary OS a bit. I don't think that's a project I'm gonna look at for much longer. I threw him $2, but I canceled my recurring subscription, because I'm like, well, the fuck, I'm gonna have to switch distributions now. I'm gonna have to go back to Fedora or find something else, you know. Fedora is probably what I would consider the best at this moment, and the reason why is their KDE is rolling. That means you're getting the latest KDE features. If they push something, you get something. It causes breakages, but you know, like, software has breakages, who cares? So they seem like they know what they're doing for the most part, and they seem like they're accepting of what I actually need. My suggestion for a kiosk mode has been kind of wishlisted for now, so that's going to be a while before that gets implemented, if at all, and we'll just kind of see how that goes. It seems like they're more focused on, like, blindness than they are with low mobility, but it'll get there eventually. We'll figure it out, even if it means I have to pick up an SDK or something and learn Qt. You know, it'll get done at some point. But for right now, KDE is by far the most usable for me, but I do need the latest KDE, so it doesn't need to be rolling. And that's something that we had the opposite problem with GNOME, is we had to roll behind. Like, we had to run Ubuntu because Ubuntu was slower, whereas Kubuntu isn't usable for us because it rolls too slowly compared to Fedora, you know? So that's just kind of the way it goes. it's kind of two sides of the story, you know, and I'm gonna find myself in the camp that has me in mind first, of course, you know, that has people that I work with, of course, or sorry, in mind, you know. Uh, this is kind of where we're at right now. So I'm not super thrilled with that. I could probably use Elementary OS on a tablet, but I don't think I could give that to somebody with cerebral palsy. I don't think I could give that to a quadriplegic and have them like actually use their system in the way that they need to. I think that the philosophy is kind of backwards. I think it won't work well for what I need. I don't think it'll work well for what a lot of people need, and that's why I just can't recommend it. You know, because it's like I can't use it. Like maybe I personally could use it if I was like willing to just do everything their way, you know, but I don't, and nobody I know does either. So like, it's just for a different audience. It's kind of a gateway into Linux, but I don't think it's a suitable like, you know, this won't be the last distribution you install. You will eventually have to switch to something else just because your use case changes, you know. Things that you do change and you will need to eventually switch to something else. So and at that point I don't really see a reason to install it because there's a lot of new friendly distributions out there. There's Linux Mint, that's kind of, you know, the big thing right now, as well as some other things. So like, what are you even doing here? You know, like why do you exist? Why do you do what you do? And yeah, that's kind of it. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.